Welcome to another edition of our podcast, Donald Trump's Attack on Immigration. I'm Bertram Souza, veteran journalist, joined today by my co-host Cynthia Rickard, also veteran journalist, and Dr. Taji Terrell, former Youngstown State University professor. When the Trump administration suggested that Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, be stripped of his citizenship and deported, the following question came to mind. Do naturalized citizens like Mamdani enjoy the same rights and privileges as natural-born Americans? The New York mayoral contender was born in Uganda, East Africa, to ethnic Indian parents. He became a U.S. citizen in 2018 and has attracted widespread media attention and controversy over his vocal support for Palestinian rights, the Guardian newspaper reported. According to The Guardian, the Trump White House appeared to pave the way for an investigation into Mamdani's status after a right-wing Republican congressman from Tennessee called for his citizenship to be revoked on the grounds that he may have concealed his support for, quote, terrorism during his naturalization process. Bear in mind that a Justice Department memo had previously instructed lawyers to institute proceedings against naturalized citizens who are suspected of having, quote, illegally procured naturalization or having done so by, quote, concealment of a material fact or by willful misrepresentation. It's clear, therefore, that the push by President Trump to deport immigrants has been expanded to include American citizens who were not born in this country. So, what are we to make of the administration's targeting of Mamdani and others? We'll ask our guest, Farhad Sethna, a nationally renowned immigration lawyer from the Cleveland area. Attorney Sethna appeared on our podcast in May to talk about President Trump's crackdown on immigration and the threat his administration poses to even those people who are in this country legally. Well, welcome back, Farhad. A lot has been happening on immigration since you last appeared on our podcast. I think it was in May. The reason I wanted to do this one is because one of the most significant developments is the Trump administration's decision to target naturalized American citizens for investigation and even deportation. Its most prominent target is Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. Give us your reaction to that. Give us your reaction not only to the targeting of what has become a prominent Democrat, but also to this overall issue of targeting naturalized citizens.
You know, Bertram, thank you first of all for having me here, and Tasi as well. I have so much to say that I don't even know where to start.
Start at the beginning and say all you want because you're the expert.
The fact of the matter is this. Thank you. The fact of the matter is this. Trump is doing nothing but trying to sow fear. And if we allow him to succeed, he will succeed. But if we don't allow him to succeed, then of course he can't. He will fail miserably, as he's failed in so many of his other attempts, including all his business ventures. But Trump's strategy is very clear and very simple. Make everyone as afraid as possible so they will not speak out. We've all watched the movie or we have read the book 1984 by George Orwell. And we are living in Orwellian times. The news is being altered. News organizations are being threatened and they're caving in. And now Trump is putting his finger on the scale of citizenship and attempting to prefer naturalized born citizens for deportation. And why is that? Because Trump wants to make sure that everybody is afraid of him and his evil regime. So with regard to Mamdani, it's a classic example. He wants to make an example of a prominent person, find some dirt on Mamdani in order to deport him. It's not so easy though. I want to tell you all viewers who are listening, thank you for being here first of all. I want to tell all of you, citizens, non-citizens, natural born citizens or naturalized citizens, it is not easy to deport anyone who is not a who is a citizen, whether they're naturalized or whether they're native born. Why? Because first of all, in order to be denaturalized, a person who's born in this country has to go through a process of denaturalization. That person who's born in the USA, a natural born citizen, can only have their citizenship revoked if they perform an expatriating act. That means they either go and serve in the army of a foreign country, let's say for example, which is at war with the United States at the time that that person performs that action. They can only be expatriated if, for example, they specifically take the option of relinquishing their US citizenship, meaning they sign a document, an affidavit, in the presence of a consul overseas or in the United States in the presence of the USCIS or Department of State official saying that they give up their US citizenship. So giving up US citizenship by birth is not easy. And the courts have held time and time again in favor of people who the government has sought to denaturalize through expatriation. Okay? That's very, very rare. So naturalized US citizens have no fear. Unless you commit some kind of terrorist act or you're trying to consort with a country which is against the interests of the United States.
How does that, who actually brings that action to take someone's citizenship away?
That's an excellent question. The U.S. Department of Justice, through the, let's say an FBI agent or whatever enforcement mechanism, files an affidavit with the district court. The district court then institutes essentially a denaturalization proceeding against that particular person, whether it's a citizen by birth or maybe a citizen by naturalization. Now, one more thing I want to tell you is this. The standard of proof required of the government in a denaturalization proceeding is extremely high. For civil denaturalization proceedings, the standard of proof is by clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence. Very high standard. For criminal denaturalization proceedings, for example, if someone has committed a crime and they're being denaturalized, that would be not a natural born citizen. Okay, that would be someone who has received naturalization through coming to the United States. Right. So someone who is a naturalized US citizen, the standard of proof in a denaturalization proceeding for criminal purposes is the same as we have in regular criminal court, beyond a reasonable doubt. So in both those cases, whether it's for denaturalization of a citizen for civil purposes or denaturalization on criminal grounds, the standard is very high.
And is there a level of crime that that has to be met before those proceedings can be started if it's a criminal denaturalization?
That's another excellent question, Cindy. Thank you so much. Yes, it has to be a felony or an aggravated felony, or it must be 2 or more crimes involving moral turpitude which occurred prior to the alien receiving their naturalization, which the alien also did not disclose on their naturalization application. Most aliens, potentially, who are naturalized, may be tripped up if they have committed any crime and fail to disclose it. Right. So disclosure is very important. If the alien, particularly someone who's committed a serious crime, doesn't disclose it, then it could be what is called a material misrepresentation. And consequently, that closes the door on the USCIS examiner asking them more about their criminal history. Consequently, they get their naturalization, it's because they conceal that fact. And therefore, that tape can be rewound and you can have the alien placed in denaturalization proceedings because their citizenship shouldn't have been issued in the first place.
Well, ever since Trump launched his war on immigrants, there is a growing sentiment in this country, especially among Trump supporters, that there is a difference between natural-born citizens and naturalized citizens who come from another country. So, do naturalized citizens enjoy the same rights and privileges as natural-born, American-born citizens?
Bertram, that is a very intelligent and profound question. Thank you for asking it. Under law, there is no difference. Trump would like to create that difference because one of Trump's incredible qualities is his ability to sow discord among people and divide them. So what he's trying to do is divide naturalized citizens from native-born U.S. citizens and create this fear among naturalized citizens that they are now a second class. That is nonsense. The only difference that there really is that native-born citizens can only lose their citizenship through an expatriating act, as I explained earlier. But naturalized citizens can lose their citizenship both through an expatriating act or through commission of certain crimes, flaws, laws, or offenses which they failed to disclose at the time of their naturalization, i.e. a material omission. So they can lose their citizenship because of that as well. That's the only difference. Other than that, every person born in the United States is, through the 14th Amendment, entitled to citizenship at birth. And I'm going to just add one more thing for your viewers. President Trump has, through his executive order, which is titled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, which he promulgated on January 20th, 2025, the day he took office, blithely goes through the 14th Amendment and then adds his own gloss on it as if he, by executive order, can change the Constitution. Well, I have news for Mr. Trump. The Constitution itself specifies how the Constitution may be changed. It cannot be changed by executive order.
May I ask what that executive order says?
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Trump likes to essentially claim, I don't know where he gets this from, but a person who is born in the United States and is not subject to the jurisdiction thereof is not a U.S. citizen. Well, he goes on to draw the tenuous line between a child born in the United States of an undocumented parent and says that because the parent is undocumented, therefore the child is also undocumented. But here's the big difference. The child is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And the parent, whether documented or not, is still subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Why? Because if the parent commits a crime, or the parent wants an immigration benefit, or the parent needs something else, let's say a benefit from the US government, that parent, even if he or she is undocumented, is still automatically subject to the jurisdiction and the laws of the United States. So Mr. Trump is totally wrong. In fact, whoever wrote the executive order for him is absolutely and completely legally and factually wrong. They've got no basis whatsoever to stand on. So I'm eager to see what's going to happen if these cases come back before the Supreme Court on the merits of this executive order.
But the Justice Department lawyers have been instructed, the Trump Justice Department, to institute proceedings against naturalized citizens who are suspected of, quote, illegally procured naturalization, or having done so by, quote, concealment of a material fact or by willful misrepresentation. Have you come across this kind of standard being applied, and how should people view what this means?
It's a very high standard. As I said earlier, the standard for civil denaturalization is by clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence, meaning there is absolutely no doubt that the alien either misrepresented or omitted important material information that, if the examiner had known such information, could have resulted in a different result. It has to be material. So, for example, not remembering where you had lunch yesterday is not a material misrepresentation or an omission. Or making a mistake about who your favorite Marvel movie character is not a material misrepresentation. But making a misrepresentation about whether or not you had been arrested in the past, that could be, not is, but could be a material misrepresentation if it could have resulted in the denial of your application for naturalization. Number two, if it is a criminal denaturalization proceeding, someone who has, let's say, committed a crime and therefore is being denaturalized or has committed criminal acts in obtaining their naturalization, for example, they bribed a government official in order to get their naturalization, those people have to be tried under criminal standards. And the standard for guilt in a criminal proceeding is beyond a reasonable doubt. So the standards are very high. And yes, I have encountered a couple, not too many, a couple denaturalization actions in the course of my immigration law career.
Are there any cases where an American born in the United States is ripped off their citizenship? Or is there a law that will do that?
Yes. A U.S. citizen who's born in the USA can lose their citizenship only by committing an expatriating act. And here's a classic example. A few years ago, we had a informant, let's say, in the U.S. military called Snowden. And Snowden revealed a lot of files to the world. And then he ran off to Russia, which granted him political asylum. By virtue of doing that, if the USA wants, they could denaturalize him. I don't think they will. And here's why. They want him back to try him. And so consequently, that's not going to happen. But if someone were to commit an act like that, that essentially supports a foreign adversary of the United States, against the United States, you're either committing sedition, which is seceding from the country, or you're committing an act of treason or an act of sabotage. Those are grounds in the law for a person to lose their citizenship even if they were born in the USA. Those are expatriating acts, which I talked about earlier in this discussion.
But given that this administration is targeting, it started out by saying they wanted only targeting the criminals who were here illegally.
The violent criminals.
The violent criminals, immigrants. Then it became, they defined criminal as, if you're in this country illegally, you've committed a crime, and therefore you can be targeted. Now they're saying, well, we're going to investigate green card holders. And now they're saying we're going to investigate naturalized citizens. In your experience, what is this all leading to?
It's leading to a police state. A state where Trump is king, he is dictator, and he's made everybody so scared that nobody, including our news media, are willing to speak out against him.
Elaborate on that. What do you mean? What would you have the news media say? What would you have thoughtful Americans say?
I would have thoughtful Americans say, we have a process in this country. That process is founded on the bedrock principles of our United States Constitution, i.e., freedom of speech, due process, citizenship rights, and the Fourth Amendment against illegal search and seizure. We have those bedrock principles, and we've got to stand up and fight for those principles. When news media cave in to Donald Trump and pay him $15 million in some nebulous fine, settlement, whatever you have, when universities cave into Trump and muzzle their own professors from intelligent, important political discourse, when people are too afraid to speak out because they're afraid that they themselves might be targeted or a friend or loved one might be targeted, when students coming to this country have to clean off their entire social media because they're afraid of what somebody might find on there and interpret as far as their political speech. When certain religions are given priority over other religions, when it's blithely asserted that immigrants are committing violent crimes when that's not the case. When the police forces of cities are being taken over by the federal government, when Marines are introduced into urban areas in full tactical gear, ready to arrest US citizens, I think, my friends, we have martial law without it being declared as martial law. That's what we're facing in America today. I know it sounds dystopian, but in just 6 months, my dear listeners, in 6 months, Mr. Trump has taken our Constitution and eviscerated it. It has been shredded. And also, I will add, with the complicity of Congress, which sits there with its hands in its lap, and with the clear inability of the Supreme Court to step in and do something about it.
Inability or refusal?
I prefer to say at this point in time, inability, because I'm being polite.
When you become an American citizen, you literally swear on protecting the Constitution. And that's what I swore on,
Right.
that I would protect the U.S. Constitution. And that's why I'm becoming a U.S. citizen, because, you know, I admire what the founders of this country has put together. But one question regarding the denaturalization and the basis for it. So as Bertram was saying, you know, Trump first started saying we are just going to get rid of criminals, but then they started canceling student visas for international students for traffic tickets. Let's say somebody who became naturalized forgot to disclose that he had a speeding ticket. Would that constitute not disclosing all your records?
Taji, you've said some very interesting things. And to answer your question first, no, the misrepresentation must be material. That is, it's a crime that, had the examiner known about it, could have resulted in a denial of the naturalization application. So no.
Before you go,
Minor things will not trigger.
is the word
a denaturalization.
material a legal word?
Yes.
So define that word material.
Yes. The word material in a legal context, especially let's say in the concept of naturalization, is something that would cause the examiner to ask more questions about that particular issue and may result in a different outcome on the case. So that would be material to the case. If the examiner doesn't like my shirt and says, why did you wear this pink shirt today? And doesn't like my answer, that's not material. That has nothing to do whatsoever with the merits of my naturalization application. Same thing with the question that Taji asked. The applicant for the naturalization, let's say, has a couple speeding tickets, forgets to disclose that. Speeding tickets are not a grounds for deportation to start with. They are not a grounds that show bad moral character. They are not grounds for any kind of additional felonious type charge that might result. So it's not material to the naturalization application. However, it has been held, for example, that failure to pay child support is a material issue because it goes to bad moral character. See, in order to be naturalized, you must fulfill the requirements of residency, knowledge of the English language, knowledge of history and civics of the United States with certain exceptions, good moral character. Okay? And then, of course, that includes
Is that actually in the law, good moral character?
Yes. Yes.
Because as the token white, natural-born American, I've never had to swear an oath to the Constitution or anything else. So it seems ridiculous to me that these people who have sworn an oath to the Constitution, including all of our Congress members and our president, and is not upholding them. I mean, I've never held public office, so I've never had to swear that. But it seems insane to me that people who have actually been asked to and are willing to swear an oath to the Constitution are being attacked and targeted when I would guess most, if not all, of the January 6th insurrectionists were natural-born Americans who never swore an oath to the Constitution and completely disregarded it.
Cindy, you raised so many questions and so many interesting issues. It's hard to know where to even start. But I'll start with a very, very simple premise. And that premise is hypocrisy. We have two sets of laws. One for the president and his coterie of yes men and yes women, and another set of laws for the rest of us, especially enforced against people who speak out against him. So that's where we are today. It's a very strange situation. And going back to your very prescient comment a few minutes ago, we have a Supreme Court that is simply not valuing the rule of law. And I'll talk more about that later if the opportunity presents itself.
Donald Trump views the Constitution as a document that is open to his interpretation, and therefore that's how he's governing. But is the Constitution clear, unequivocal on issues such as citizenship and immigration and those kinds of issues, where therefore the courts would not have leeway to, quote, interpret the way they wanted to? And the reason I ask this is this. So in going after Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, a right-wing Republican congressman from Tennessee called for Mamdani's citizenship to be revoked on the grounds that he may have concealed his support for, quote, terrorism during the naturalization process. How would that work?
It won't work, because as we've seen time and time again, this Republican Congress, Republican senators, Republican representatives are falling over backwards to appease Trump. They are in the cult of Trump, and they will say and do anything to get on his good books. Here's a great example that, as you talked about for Mr. Mamdani. First of all, they've got to prove that he did any of this stuff. Okay, they've got to have actual proof, not some made-up allegations as they did for Abrego Garcia after the fact that they had mistakenly shipped him off to CCOT. And then they had all the explanations that came up. Okay, Mamdani is here. Mamdani is now. Mamdani is smart. Okay, they've got to prove he allegedly had terrorist ties to terrorist organizations that were, of course, inamicable to the United States. Good luck with that, Senator. Okay, maybe Donald will come up with some twisted rhetoric as to why Mamdani is a terrorist. But Donald's twisted rhetoric doesn't stand up in a court of law. We still are a nation of laws. And dear listener, let's keep it a nation of laws, not of men. Because if we go down the latter path, we are doomed. Our democracy is doomed. And little by little, trust me, he's going to come after you and me and your neighbor. So let's keep it a nation of laws.
So you've pointed out the crux of the whole problem is that we have to keep a nation of laws, which means that our courts have to continue to function. And our Supreme Court has to continue to function. Donald Trump has decided that if he continues to delay and move lawsuits through the courts, get it up to the Supreme Court, that it is inevitably going to rule his way. And I keep having the vision of him walking out of the State of the Union address and touching the justice on the shoulder and saying, "Thanks, I'll never forget it." I mean, it was just abhorrent to me. I can't believe that Congress people aren't feeling the same way. What is your sense of how long the courts will hold? Because they have pretty much taken away the lower court's ability to rule for the country. So he's got even more leeway to make it to the Supreme Court, where he is usually going to get a favorable ruling for him.
Yes. Two points in answer to that question. Number one, cases that go to the regular Supreme Court process, which is a party appeals to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has to go through literally hundreds of requests for hearings and cull maybe 80 to 100 cases maximum that are going to be heard during that term. That's a grant of certiorari, meaning the court cases have gone through the entire process, they've been completely briefed and reviewed, and now they're appealing to the Supreme Court. Only 80 to 100 cases maximum per term, okay? But we've had in this term alone, I think we are on emergency appeal number 22 filed by the Trump administration. And in only 3 of those appeals has the Supreme Court ruled against Trump. What is even more troubling, and Cindy, I appreciate you bringing up this point, even more troubling is that most of those opinions affirming the decisions of the administration and allowing Trump to do illegal things have been without a fully reasoned opinion, which means that lower courts have no direction as to why the Supreme Court held a certain way, what the Supreme Court was thinking. And in most of those cases, we simply have a 6-3 all the time. The 3 democratically appointed Supreme Court justices versus the 6 Republican appointed Supreme Court justices. We are in a horrible situation, Cindy. And we have a Supreme Court which has chosen, I think the word is absolutely true there, has chosen to abdicate its responsibility to uphold the rule of law. And I'll give you just a couple examples. Number 1, the decision of the Supreme Court to uphold the termination of federal employees. Okay, that's one of those particular cases. The other one is the decision, let's say, of the Supreme Court, which happened only in this term, of course, in the last 6 months. The decision of the Supreme Court essentially to change the way that nationwide injunctions can be granted by lower court justices, saying that district courts cannot issue nationwide injunctions anymore. They must be issued only through a class action process, which totally eviscerates the ability of the district courts to stop a bad policy or procedure until it's fully litigated. That's a very, very dangerous...
Explain that. What do you mean until it's fully litigated?
Okay. Let me explain the process itself. The process itself says, essentially in the past, before this latest Supreme Court decision, and it came out in the birthright citizenship cases, okay, before the court of this term. The previous process was, if a party is aggrieved by what is happening, the party can petition a district court for an injunction. The district court, having listened to the merits of that injunctive relief action, can either grant the injunction, deny the injunction, or partially issue the injunction, meaning stopping the policy of the government. In this particular case for the birthright citizenship, the lower courts all said that Trump's executive order could not be enforced. It was against the Constitution. And they believed that the plaintiffs, who were the states seeking to enjoin or stop the order, were going to probably prevail at the end. So they issued the injunction. Not only they issued the injunction, but then they issued a nationwide injunction, meaning across the country. This injunction was going to be upheld, okay? That the US government could not simply strip away people's citizenship. This executive order could not be enforced. Well, lo and behold, it goes up to the Supreme Court. What does the Supreme Court rule? The Supreme Court says it's not ruling on the merits of the executive order. The Supreme Court is ruling on what the district courts did and says, oh, look, in a case like this, you can't issue nationwide injunctions. We're taking away the ability of district courts to issue nationwide injunctions. Those nationwide injunctions can only come in the form of a class action lawsuit.
And is that just for the birthright citizenship
No,
issue? It's for
every
everything, right?
injunctive relief issue is now been foreclosed unless it can be presented. I shouldn't say every, because that's something that may not be quite accurate, but it's going to be extremely limited compared to what we have in terms of this birthright citizenship. And it's inappropriate for birthright citizenship. Why? Because if there's any issue which deserves a nationwide injunction, it's birthright citizenship. You're going to have babies born of alien parents in Vermont. You're going to have babies born of alien parents in Hawaii. It's across the entire country. Okay? So it's a perfect issue, a perfect vehicle for a nationwide injunction. Yet the Supreme Court said no, without too much of an explanation. There they at least actually issued a short opinion. But in 22 out of the 23 of these emergency actions, they've issued a paragraph or two. That's it. And typical Supreme Court
Unsigned
opinions...
as well, right?
I'm sorry?
Unsigned?
Unsigned.
Yeah.
But typically, in Supreme Court opinions, as you seem to know a lot about them, Cindy, they're usually 2-3 dozen pages long, at least. At least, because it explains why they ruled a certain way, which is critical because what the Supreme Court said is going to be the law of the land. And lower courts have to then take those opinions and understand them so they can apply them in future cases.
Well, let me ask you, so if that's the ruling today, if let's say the tide changes in 2026, how long would it take to reverse these decisions that have been made by the Supreme Court? Can we expect them to happen in the following year, the following decade? What happens?
Well, Cindy, I am extremely pessimistic about it. First of all, the Democrats have got to get their act together.
Yeah.
Second of all, they've got to win not just a majority, but a super majority in the House and the Senate. Why? Because otherwise they'll be subject to endless filibusters. Okay? Number 3, they've got to be able to do this in the face of blatant gerrymandering.
Yeah.
And we have a system, Cindy, which is so broken right now, both in the legislative branch and with the judicial branch, as we're seeing with the Supreme Court and its decisions, that I fear this won't happen. Now, the next part of your question also talks about decisions and changing. Who can change a decision? Congress can by changing the law. But the courts also can by changing presidential decisions. But you now have a 6-3 split in the Supreme Court. And many of those 6 Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices are fairly young. They're not going anywhere soon. So consequently, you're going to have that makeup of the Supreme Court, maybe 5-4, if there's a Democratic president in office, perhaps. But if that doesn't happen, you're still going to have a majority of the Republican-appointed nominees being able to dictate the direction the court is taking. So it's going to be very hard to change the trajectory in which this country is heading.
So when immigrants in America today, both legal and illegal, can not depend on the White House, cannot depend on the Republican majority in Congress, can perhaps even not depend on the Supreme Court, what's left? What do immigrants face in this country today?
It's a very bleak future. And I'm not going to say that and try to sugarcoat it and talk about rah-rah and America is the great land of hope and opportunity, etc., because clearly that hope and opportunity is not being doled out fairly to everybody. We have a big case coming up in the Supreme Court in the next term, and it's about the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court has already dismantled key portions of the Voting Rights Act, saying they're unnecessary, that the discrimination of the past is over. The Jim Crow era is gone. So we don't need those protections. We've got a Department of Justice, which is usually the agency which brings Voting Rights Act violations to the courts. That Department of Justice, under Pam Bondi, is not going to do a damn thing to preserve voting rights because it doesn't help the Republicans keep a majority in the House and the Senate. So we are in for very bleak times. And I'm not just talking about this as an immigration attorney. I'm talking about this from all aspects of the law. Wherever we turn, wherever we look, we see protections for everybody being rolled back. Health and Human Services. We've got a person there in the Health and Human Services whose brain has been half eaten away by a brain worm. Okay? This man is now dictating healthcare policy for all of us. All right? They're talking about not having kids be vaccinated. We're seeing a huge surge in measles cases. Soon it'll be chickenpox, and God help us if we get back to smallpox. We've got issues again with the military, the Department of Defense. We've got Hexeth, who blatantly sends out plans on signal for the world to read, including a reporter, and yet they're persisting with investigating Hillary Clinton for using an email server in her home. Double standard, hypocrisy. I could go on and on. The CFPB, for example, which supposedly was created to protect the rights of consumers like you and me, CFPB dismantled. Trump doesn't like the Bureau of Labor Statistics position on employment. Fire the statistician. Fire the statistician because they got to be wrong. Trump is right. And let's find some stooge who will go into the Department of Labor and massage the statistics so they make Trump look good.
Well, now they're talking about not publishing the statistics anymore.
Absolutely. Why should you publish? Who needs information? Let's stop the information on the weather, on global warming, on how terrible tornadoes and cyclones and floods have become. No, the less we know, America, the better for you. Because the dumber you get, the more they get to stay in power. That's what we're seeing today.
All right. So you mentioned that, and you talked about how the media, universities, all these different organizations have sort of folded in the face of Donald Trump. You didn't mention major law firms.
Yeah.
And you didn't mention the fact that these are prominent law firms where you would at least think that there were lawyers in those firms who are going to say, hey, our Constitution is being ripped apart. We cannot allow this to happen, and yet you have these firms not only, sort of apologizing to Donald Trump, but pledging millions of dollars in pro bono, cases, etc. What is going on with your profession?
They're a bunch of sycophants, weaklings, and they're greedy. They're like everyone else. They want to be on the top. The partners want to make their money. They don't want to lose their clearances. They don't want to lose lucrative government contracts. And they don't want to lose the private clients they have who rely on them for the government contracts and contacts they have for the lobbying that they're doing and the billions they're going to get in contracts from the federal government. It's all about the money. And if anything, Donald Trump has shown us, it's how enmeshed the federal government is with our economic system. Colleges and universities have capitulated because they're getting the federal dole. Hospitals are going to capitulate for the same reason. Every part of our economy is intimately intertwined with the federal government when it comes to money. And law firms, especially big law firms that make millions in various contracts and clients, etc., who deal with the federal government are no different. They're also feeding at the federal trough. Your money and mine, dear taxpayer.
Playing devil's advocate here, if they didn't capitulate, and these universities were losing billions of dollars that would go to scientific research primarily. If they didn't capitulate, where does that leave us as a country? If Trump is able to eliminate those universities, eliminate all of those law firms that I don't know what all they do, but I imagine that they do some things for the common people that would be lost. Where does that leave this country except to have an authoritarian regime at the head and nobody else has any say in anything?
I think it requires boldness and vision. And we've seen neither from the other side, i.e. the Democratic Party. We have seen nothing, no word at all from Kamala Harris after her devastating loss. We have seen no rallying cry. The only voice that I hear from time to time is Gavin Newsom out in California. And the concern I have, and you've again raised a very critical point, the concern I have is that people want to appease Trump, and that's where they're capitulating. You can't capitulate to a bully. When you give the bully something, that bully only wants more, and wants more, and wants more. So the way to do it, in my opinion, would have been Columbia, some of the greatest lawyers in the country. Harvard, some of the greatest lawyers in the country. Okay, all these Ivies, fight it out. Go to the Supreme Court. They did that successfully in Trump 1 when they three times were able to overturn Trump's visa ban on the basis that it was biased because of national origin and prejudice. Fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. And then you have the ultimate authority that we have as people, as citizens. Strike. Shut down this nation. 2 weeks without anybody going to work or anything meaningful happening will shut down this nation.
Where are the leaders calling for that? I don't hear them.
I don't either.
Bernie Sanders is really the only one.
I don't
either. I've not heard anyone suggest what you just suggested.
I don't either. Well, I'm suggesting it, but I'm not a leader.
Yeah, no.
So I mean it. I mean it. Because once business is hurt in the pocketbook, and they're already hurting because of the tariffs, the idiotic tariff yo-yo that's going on for the last 6 months, okay, with Taco Trump, all right, that's craziness. How can businesses function in this environment?
If you're a white American watching this, and watching you, a naturalized citizen, me, a naturalized citizen, Taj, and Cindy being the only American-born citizen, if you're a white viewer, he'll look at you and say, why are you screaming about the sky falling? It isn't falling. We're still the greatest country on earth. Everything's fine. My kid's in Little League, and I've had a great vacation, went to Disney World. What the hell are you talking about? Your perspective isn't the American perspective. Yes?
My response would be, wait for 6 months. Let the tariffs kick in. Wait for 6 months. Let all the people who pick your vegetables be deported. Wait for 6 months. Let all the people who work in the hospitality industry and in the various jobs that require construction, manual labor, etc. be deported. And then let's see what tune you'll be singing in 6 months. And I'm not saying this in a mean way. I'm not saying this to my dear brothers and sisters who are native-born U.S. citizens, whether black or white or whatever race you are. I'm saying this with love and respect for our nation. Our nation was founded on democratic principles. Our nation was founded on the rule of law. Our nation was not founded on a foreign country giving Donald a jumbo 747 jet as a gift, and him lapping it up as the greatest gift there is and having it refitted as Air Force One, which probably is going to be full of bugs so that everybody in the whole world can hear what President Donald Trump is saying and what President Donald Trump is being advised by his advisors, even before Pete Hegseth puts it out on Signal. Keep that in mind.
I wanted to back up to this birthright citizenship for a minute, because I know that there was a lot of talk even before Trump came into office, maybe before his first term, but I'm not sure, about these foreign women, pregnant women, who are flying to the United States, and California particularly, I'm told, has these lodgings that they come to, and they stay until they deliver their baby so that it is an American-born citizen. How much did that play into this uproar over birthright citizenship?
Well, I don't know how much it played into it because I don't know what thought processes are employed by our dear leader and his followers. But I will say that what you're talking about is definitely an issue. but it can be resolved. How? There are lots of groups that are doing this kind of birth tourism, okay? And those groups can be stopped. You can crack down on those. There can also be, obviously, a medical process at the airport for people who are coming in to determine if they're pregnant or not, and then determining whether they need to be returned back to their home countries.
So not allowing foreign women
Absolutely.
into the country.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. We still have our nation. We still have our laws. And we're talking about protecting our laws and protecting our borders. But here's a classic example where you can apply visa restrictions against people that you think are not going to be necessarily helpful to the future of the United States. Because sometimes people come here and they have a baby and they can't even afford to pay for the hospitalization. What happens if there's a complication? We know it could be a $2 or $3 million bill by the time the child is able to go home if there's some complication. Who's paying for that? You and me.
Well, Trump's going to give $5,000 so women can have more babies. They want more babies to come in. They want more babies to be born.
Cynthia, you're kind of contradicting yourself. So let me finish my answer, okay? Point number 2. A baby that's born in the United States currently, of course, is a U.S. citizen. However, a U.S. citizen child cannot petition for his or her parents, or any relative for that matter, until he or she turns 21.
Oh, 21.
Yes. So this baby, 6 months old, can't be given a pen to grasp in their grubby little hands and scribble their name, okay, on a petition. No, they've got to be at least 21. And then they've got to have a financial sponsor who has enough money to sponsor the alien who they're applying for.
So you think that's what this uproar is about, that they would bring their families in on chain migration?
Correct, but the chain isn't happening today.
Yeah.
The chain isn't happening tomorrow. The chain is potentially happening 21 years later. So dear viewer, please, whatever you're being fed by whatever news source you're listening to, chain migration is not a thing. Okay? It's being created to make you angry. It's being created to make you afraid. It's being created to make you vilify somebody else. But it is not a thing. It is not real.
Well,
a baby
except
born
in
in the
White
US.
House.
Well, lots of things that are not real are prevalent in the White House,
Yeah.
Cindy.
Yeah,
That's its own little alternative universe right there.
yeah.
Okay?
And a
Correct.
prime example of that is the fact that here it is, Donald Trump's attack on immigration that has energized his base, especially the MAGA base. And yet he has come up with this plan. If you've got $5 million, you can get a gold green card and become a permanent resident. And imagine who has the $5 million.
Yeah.
They're
The oligarchs.
the oligarchs, the mafia dons from Italy, all of the people who are of questionable character would be able to afford this card that he says is going to be the greatest thing in immigration.
Well, I won't go so far as to smear everybody who's coming in for a $5 million green card with the same brush. Because there may be someone who's retired who wants to get U.S. citizenship. And I respect
Okay.
that. That's perfectly fine. But here's my problem. It's all about access. And it's all about connections. And it's all about wealth. From the economic standpoint, you do want investment to this country. But you're going to get investment regardless.
Right.
Because people still want to come to this country. What you don't have, and this is from an economic standpoint, I'm no professor of economics, but very, very long ago, in the midst of time, economic theory was predicated on 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and enterprise. That still holds today. Okay? And when we are eliminating labor by deporting droves of people, 11 million people, 12 million people, 20 million people, you can have all the money in the world pouring into this country, but who's going to do the jobs which US citizens don't want to do? Who's going to pack your meat? Who's going to get your eggs? Who's going to harvest your vegetables? Who's going to build your homes? Who's going to put your roof on your house?
Are those just rhetorical questions,
No.
or are they based on reality?
They are based on reality. You can look at, as long as they exist, Department of Labor statistics which show that many of these jobs are overwhelmingly filled by people of foreign origin. Okay?
And that's even in this valley, because I've had
Right.
workers on my home that have.
Now, not only that, I'm going to say one last thing about this. You study the economics of the other developed nations, especially Western Europe, they're all suffering. You know why? They don't have enough workers to do their jobs. They're importing workers. Germany, for example, has a huge Turkish population. France has a huge African population from all its former colonies in Northern Africa. If they don't have those workers, Italy is suffering today because it doesn't have enough workers. They're paying out a lot to their retirees and in social insurance programs. They don't have enough of a base to keep on funneling taxes into their treasury. Same thing's happening in the USA. You know this. Social Security is slated to go broke in 2034. Those dates change from time to time based on how they can massage the statistics. But Social Security is going broke. Medicare is going broke. Who's going to pay for you and me to retire or get sick if we deport everybody who's working?
Okay. In light of that economic reality, how do you explain the rise of white nationalism, not only in this country, but in Europe?
I am not a sociologist, but I can say this. There is not much logic being applied by white nationalists. It's all about anger. They feel marginalized. They feel talked down to by, in our country, the coastal elites, so to speak. And some of that is true. Democrats have done a horrible job about reaching out to the middle class. Democrats have done a horrible job about reaching out to Latinos and the young black population. Therefore, we had so many Latinos and African Americans voting for Republicans whose interests absolutely collide with the Republican philosophy. But they did it. Why? Because they were fed the soma of the Republican majority in the Republican Party that happens to be white, that we will take care of you. The Democrats haven't. So shame on the Democrats for letting go of that very important demographic which has been key to their victory in past elections. So that's number one. Number two, lack of the ability to make concerted and intelligent judgments on various topics by following an idea down to its source. We are deluged, and our leadership loves it, deluged by the 20-second TikTok soundbite. If you can't fit a thought into 20 seconds, it ain't worth listening to the whole thing. This discussion has gone on for a long time already. How many viewers are going to sit and listen to the whole thing? So we have a dumbed down educational system, which is sometimes forcibly dumbed down, because instead of teaching English and logic, we are teaching the Bible in Oklahoma, for example. Okay, we're devoting class time to religious baseless theory rather than educating our kids on how to read and write and do math and to apply logic. So, it's a bad place.
Do you see any hope in the sort of the growing protests that are occurring across the country?
Yes, I do. I do see hope because as people protest, they reach other people, and there's going to be at some point a critical mass of people who need to stand up and say this is enough. And as I said, we are still a nation of laws. Vote the useless bums out of office, Democrat or Republican. Vote them out and let people who are actually going to be progressive and who are going to vote and work for your interest, my dear viewer, your interest and my interest, and above all, America's interest. So I want to tell all the people who are watching, especially progressives, wrap yourselves in the flag. You are all patriots. Patriotism isn't just the realm of the American right nationalist. It's the realm of all of us. That flag belongs to you. It belongs to me. Wrap yourself in the flag and let's fight together for a democratic America with democratic principles and a level playing field for all.
Anything else?
I just want to say, I'm glad that you said that, because I have to say that I and a number of my acquaintances and friends have become averse when we see the American flag on a car, because it has been so overtaken by the ultra conservatives.
Take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back. It's your flag too.
However, before we leave, you are scheduled to give a speech at a concert on peace in where? And could talk about
Sure,
that.
thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate that, Bertram. Yes, on the 21st of September, I'm scheduled to be the featured speaker, whatever that means, at the Concert for Peace, which is organized in Akron at the First Congregational Church on Market Street. And there are details on my Facebook page. So please, if you're in the area, Youngstown and surrounding cities, Akron and surrounding cities, please do attend. You can buy tickets online. They're very reasonable. And again, it's September 21st in the evening. It's a Sunday. The doors open at 6 and the actual concert starts at 7. There will be numerous folk musicians and poets. And then, of course, yours truly as the featured speaker.
Do you know
if
what
you
you're
hadn't got enough of me now and you still want more suffering, come and attend.
Do you know what you're going to be, what topic you're going to be speaking on?
Peace.
What does that mean?
Whatever it is to whoever's listening.
What is your Facebook page?
Just my name.
Just your name.
Yes, just my name. Farhad Sethna, for those who are watching remotely.